Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. It is number 5 in this series on Southern African markets. And today we will focus on the water sector and its challenges and opportunities in the region. So my name is Catherine Bowens, and I'm heading the Wallonia Export and Investment Office in Johannesburg. And I will be your moderator today. So first of all, I will share my screen so I can introduce our speakers for today. Here. Suppose you see my screen. So first of all, Mr. Jacques Massard, who is acting president for the CBL ACP, the Chamber CBL ACP has been our partner for this series of webinar, and I take this chance to thank them for their support. And Jacques Massard is wearing 2 hats this morning. He's also the owner of ASPAC International, with extensive experience in both the water sector and African markets. Then we will listen to Duncan Bonnet from Africa House. Duncan was already with us in February for kickoff webinar, so thank you, Duncan, for being here again to focus on the water sector with us. And then we'll have a panel of 4 to whom I will ask more targeted questions due to time constraints. Dr. Greenwell Machaya from the International Water Management Institute, Mr. Diego Juan Rodriguez from the World Bank, Mr. Mogan Padayashi from Rand Water, and Lawrence Devers from Waterloo. One more thing before we start, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And my colleague Marius is connected with us, and he will be monitoring the chat box to make sure we address all of your questions. So feel free to make use of this chat box and share your thoughts and questions. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to Jacques. Here.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Fine, so I will share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen.
Very good. So, let me just remove this from here. So thank you once more for the opportunity. So, as you mentioned, as Catherine mentioned, I am the president, acting president of the Chamber of Commerce CBL ACP. I'm as well a business owner. My company is working in Africa since now over 15 years in the water sector. So I will briefly introduce the chamber and then present the concept of non-revenue water. So the content of the presentation includes, as I mentioned, the presentation of the chamber, and then a few topics to introduce what non-revenue water is about. So I will provide the definition of the non-revenue water. We will have an overview of what non-revenue water means worldwide. We will look at what an intelligent water management system could be. Then I will introduce or present a case study, a project that we are completing now in Abidjan. Then we will be looking at the results and the benefits. And then I will present a few financial models and partnerships. So the chamber, of course, is a chamber of commerce, which has just turned 60 years. It's headquartered in Belgium. We are actually looking at businesses between Belgium, Luxembourg, and ACP countries, between ACP countries and Belgium, Luxembourg. It's important because we are looking at equitable and fair exchanges between the 2 parties. We have recently hosted the Nigeria Belgian Luxembourg Business Forum, where here in Brussels, where quite a number of Nigerian representatives were present, and it was interesting to exchange, to also bring them here on the European market. We represented in over 30 countries. We are working with over 150 members, multi-sectors. We're talking about pharmaceuticals, engineers, transport, logistics, construction, IT, food, beverage, you name it. the chamber is managed by 20 business leaders, entrepreneurs, senior academics, and international consultants. And among our members, we have the Antwerp World Diamond Center. We have B6, which is a large construction company here in Belgium and active worldwide, obviously. Brussels Airlines, our national airlines. DEME, Jan de Nul, Siemens Energy, and alongside with over 100 entrepreneurs and SMEs. So that is the chambers in a nutshell. So if you want to unlock your potential, I mean, you are welcome to join us, and I invite you to send us an email at the address you see at the left of the screen. So now I'm going to touch on the non-revenue water. So I'll provide the definition as simply as I can. So basically, non-revenue water is the difference between the water produced and the water built. That is very simple, at least on the screen. Providing more details, we are going to look at water losses and authorized consumption. As you can see here, perhaps on my screen, let me just like take a laser pointer. Okay. So here you see this is the water we supply. Then it goes into the system. And then it's divided into like, it goes into two categories, you know, the water losses and then the authorized consumption. So water losses is itself divided into two categories, if I may say, the apparent losses and the real losses. Real losses, it's fairly easy. It's a leakage. Basically, that is it, meaning a pipe burst, a leakage at connections, leakage at valves, etc. And then apparent losses is actually, could be actually like water theft or inaccuracies in metering, etc. Then when we look at authorized consumption, we are also going to go to unbilled authorized consumption. So it's unbilled, therefore it does not generate revenues. And obviously the billed authorized consumption. Then the sum of the three here, apparent losses, real losses, unbilled authorized consumptions, gives you the volume of non-revenue water, meaning the water which is produced but does not generate revenues. According to some World Bank estimates, we are looking at over $140 billion per year of water lost worldwide, or let's say of non-revenue worldwide. I'll give you an example now of what I myself have seen during a project that I did in Rundu, Namibia, meaning in the region down there. That is a drawing which was made by a plumber of the water utility to illustrate what an apparent loss is. So you have here, if you will see, the normal connection. So I mean the pipe, this is service connection. It comes here, a valve, a meter, and then all the way to the house, right? So what the people are doing there, this is underground here, they actually bypass it. You see, they install a T here. They come with a hose, right, a flexible hose, and they connect it here all the way to the house. Therefore, it's bypassed and it's not going through the meter. That is typically an example of what apparent loss is. Okay. So looking at it worldwide, what are we talking about? I mean, here I've made like kind of comparison with what we find globally and what we can find in some large African cities. So you see that London goes to around 20 to 25% of non-revenue water. New York around 20 to 30. And then you have countries like Japan with a city like Tokyo, which apparently goes to all the way down to 3 to 5%, which is like exceptional. You can find this kind of range perhaps in some countries in the Middle East like Jordan, which is a super dry country. Then Sydney, Australia, around 10%. And then we go to Mexico, over 40%. And then we can compare with some large African cities like Lagos, Nigeria, which goes over 50%. Poor infrastructure, illegal connections, and lack of maintenance contribute to this high figure. Nairobi, Kenya, between 40 to 50%. So aging infrastructure, unauthorized connections, inadequate metering systems. Johannesburg, your place. So we're looking at 35 to 40%. That will be confirmed later by the panel, I guess. So South African cities have worked to reduce losses, but Johannesburg still experiences significant water loss due to theft, leaks, and other inefficiencies. Then Accra, Ghana, where we are also active, by the way. So again, 50 to 55%. Cairo, a large city, 30 to 35. You can see that it's a bit better. Obviously, it's a dry country, so they need to actually work on it seriously. And then Kinshasa, about 50 to 60%. So you can see that we are looking at a huge volume of water which is produced, but which just does not generate revenues, making the sector completely cost ineffective. So looking at solutions now, so I call it towards an intelligent water management system. So we'll be actually trying to upgrade the infrastructure to understand the behavior of a network and make sure that we can control the water which is distributed. So we will be looking at smart metering. Actually, I guess the correct word would be connected metering, because the meters are connected to a system. It can actually give some information, like when there is no more water flowing through. I mean, it will ring an alarm, and then of course the utility can go and check what is going on there. Acoustic leak detection, as the name says it, I mean, would be more like looking at water lost through the network. Pressure management is a very important aspect of a non-revenue water project. Why? Because we can see that there is a linear relationship between pressure and leakage, meaning that the higher the pressure in a network, in a pipe, the higher the number of leaks. So it's very important in a network to actually look at pressure management. Then data analytics and AI. So that obviously can help us to predict and locate leaks, optimize maintenance schedules, and reduce operational costs. Then automated alerts, I think I've touched on that before. It's also very important. And then last but not least, what's very, very critical in the management of a network is to actually get the user's participation. And you will see that in a non-revenue water project, yes, you have all the technical measures and investment measures that you have to put in place. But what is key for the success, according to our experience, obviously, for the success of a non-revenue water project is to actually sensitize, educate the population on the need to report leaks, on the need to avoid stealing water, because it affects the whole community. And that is a very, very important component. It's a soft component, and we call it, of a non-revenue water project, which in my opinion should never be underestimated. And here is a concrete case. This is a project that we are completing. I mean, we've been working on it since over 24 months now. And then we are completing this project in Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. So we have there, when we arrived, we had a situation whereby non-revenue water was estimated at around 52%. And that 52% included fraud, metering errors, pipe leaks, you can see, quite significant, service connection leaks, and therefore they were losing around 11 million cubic meters per year. I'm talking about an area north of Abidjan. It's an area called, a commune called Abobo. Okay, so we are going to complete the 30 months now. And the strategies we used were network modeling, including model calibration in the field, very important. Why? Because what you get on a screen or what you get from your calculation is, okay, fair enough, but you need to actually make sure that it actually mirrors the reality in the field. Therefore, we did some calibration to make sure that the data we get from the computer are actual data. And therefore, from our screen, we can then plan our measures. Then update of existing network map. Obviously, it's very difficult to work on a network. Why? Everything is buried, so you don't see it. And that has been buried a long time ago. So perhaps there is no drawing, perhaps there is no map, and perhaps the people who have built the network are not working any longer. Therefore, in most instances, we need actually to go back to the drawing board and find out what's in the ground, underground. Sorry. Then identification and replacement of faulty equipment. We're talking about valves, we're talking about meters, we're talking about vents, etc. Replacement of undersized pipes, very important as well, because if a pipe is undersized, but obviously the pressure inside is high. And as I mentioned before, the higher the pressure, the more chance you have leaks. Then network sectorization, DMA, district metered area, and flow management with flow meters. Pressure management, obviously. We've installed also 42,000 private connections with connected meters. And again, I repeat, what's very important is raising public awareness through field teams. So we have platoons of even sociologists actually who are going to talk to the people to explain to them the importance of a proper distribution. So the outcome, we've been touching around like 1 million people. We are going to get down from 52% to 35% non-revenue water. Not enough, but it's a good start. The potential gain in water cell will be an increase of 4 million cubic meters per year. And we're talking about, based on their tariff there, around 2.6 million euro per year of additional revenue for the water utility. Okay, so that's also an important number here. The 4,000 cubic meters of water, we're talking about water. I mean, as you all know, water is a precious resource. So here we actually use optimally 4 million cubic meters per year. All right. What are the benefits? Cost savings, I think that is obvious. Revenue enhancement, I guess that is obvious as well. I mean, you are going to produce water, you are going to sell more water, and therefore you are going to increase your revenue. Environmental benefit, minimizing non-revenue water means less water extraction from natural resources, conserving the island, sorry, it's an example from Jamaica, a precious water ecosystem. Okay, so that is very important as well. Energy efficiency. With reduced non-revenue water, less energy is needed for water treatment and distribution, leading to a decrease in the carbon footprint of water services. And finally, sustainable development. Lower non-revenue water supports commitment to sustainable water management and aligns with environmental conservation goals. So these are the benefits of a non-revenue water project, among others. To complete the presentation, we will be looking at financial models and partnerships. These are options, right? I mean, I'm not sure there is one better than others, but these are options which are available on the market with a strong preference we can see on performance-based contracts. So we have export credit, so financing of EPC projects, meaning investment measures and procurement of equipment. I'm not sure whether everyone is familiar with the term EPC. EPC means engineering, procurement, construction. So that means to deliver project on a turnkey basis, kind of. Okay, so the contractor will do the whole thing. Then, of course, the public-private partnerships, attracting private investments for infrastructure projects with cost-sharing arrangements, boosting efficiency and sharing risks. That could be an option in some instances. Then performance-based contract. Contractors are paid based on achieving specific reduction targets, leading to improved system efficiency and financial savings. As I mentioned, that is, in my experience for now, tomorrow is another day, but for now, that's kind of a preferred like arrangement by some clients. We see that, for instance, in Jamaica, I mentioned that before, but we also see that now in Togo and in Benin, for instance. And I know that they will be looking at similar arrangement in Cameroon also. Then green bonds. Issuing environmental bonds can finance sustainable water projects with potentially lower interest rates due to their eco-friendly appeal. That could also be an option. Then, of course, we will have, the idea is to have a return on investment, which could be substantial. That obviously must be studied on a case-by-case basis. And then the long-term financial benefits will be increased revenue, operational savings, and resilient to drought and climate change. Now, one last information I want to provide is this. I mean, we see in many instances, and I'm thinking of Abidjan, I'm thinking of Yaoundé, and I'm thinking of other cities as well, whereby the authorities have invested massively in producing more water. So you go, you invest, hundreds of millions of euros in water treatment plants, you extract more resource, you invest in the infrastructure, and then you send it to the network. But you don't work on the network. And therefore, the impact of additional production is basically nil, if not negative. Negative meaning that the more pressure you put in the network, meaning the more water you put in the network, therefore you have more pressure, and it can even worsen the situation. So now we see, if I take Yaoundé as a concrete example, because we're working on it, I mean, they have been adding a huge quantity of water, but now they are scrambling actually to work on the network. Otherwise, it will destroy the existing infrastructure. So that's also something we have to look at. What do? Do we put more water in production, or do we look at distribution? I think the choice is easy. So to terminate, each of these investment models and strategy would need to be tailored to the specific economic and environmental contexts to ensure the effectiveness and sustainability. So that is what I wanted to present to you this morning, and I thank you so much for your attention, and I'm of course available for any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. Very interesting. It was a bit longer than expected, but thank you for also addressing the financial models. I think it's very interesting for participants. And we will immediately hand the screen to Duncan Bonnet, who is Director for Market Access and Research at Africa House. Jacques, can you stop sharing your screen so Duncan may share his?
I will try. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you. And so, Duncan, you follow many projects on Sub-Saharan Africa, and today we're going to talk about water sector.
Yeah, thank you very much, Catherine. Yes, I'm going to run through this quite quickly so we can get to the experts on the panel. And Jacques has already obviously touched on the issue of non-revenue water, which is critical. This is just SADC in numbers. I'm not going to go through it because you'll all be able to get the presentation afterwards. But I think just in terms of, if you look at the region, there's over 400 million people in the SADC, in other words, the Southern African region. It's a large piece of real estate, about just 9.9 million square kilometers, relatively low population per square kilometer. And then if you look at the difference in the sizes of economies, it ranges quite significantly from South Africa at around $380 to $400 billion down to the Seychelles at a couple of $1 billion. I think what is interesting is that by the end of this decade, it'll be $1 trillion economic region. Right, so just in terms of project activity, and I think in order to speak about water in a more general context, we need to understand what is driving development in the region at a higher level. So this project data is taken from our project platform. In Southern Africa, we have around 2,500 projects in the system, about $460 billion worth of projects. And you can see where it comes in. So power, ports, rail, oil and gas and petrochemicals, commercial, residential property, and I think we'll touch on some of that a little bit later, mining, and then dams, water and sanitation. So about 10% of that figure is in the dams and water and sanitation sector. And then you can see some of the others. I think importantly, mining, manufacturing, industrial, and the commercial residential is important for this presentation, simply because they are heavy draws of water, as well as agriculture. In terms of the distribution of projects, South Africa has just over 30% of the total, although quite a few of those projects are dormant. They haven't kicked off yet. Mozambique, a lot of that is the big gas projects in the north, but also a lot of infrastructure projects. And given how prone Mozambique is to flooding and catastrophic cyclones and typhoons, I think it's important from a water perspective to understand that as well. And you can go through some of those other countries as well that are quite critical. Jacques did mention Namibia. Namibia is rapidly emerging as an energy frontier, whether it's oil, green hydrogen, battery minerals, that kind of thing. So whilst it doesn't have a big population, a lot of the economic development that it is experiencing is water intensive. And there is a need to obviously look at that in more detail. There you can see, so there's this rapid rush to replace fossil fuels. And there is this sort of global contestation over finding these battery minerals. Southern Africa, by the end of this decade, will probably contribute about 10% of the global total. And what that means is that there are a large number of mines that are developing across the region. And with mines comes urbanization. A lot of these minerals are in stranded locations. So as you build a mine, you're building a small town around it. And obviously that has implications, both positive and negative for water consumption. So you can see that in terms of sub-Saharan Africa, the bulk of these renewable energy mineral projects are in Africa. In Southern Africa. We've got about 190 in our database, another 40 in the pipeline, and every day we're coming up more of them. So it's very important to understand the impact that could have. In terms of cities, cities in Southern Africa that have 400,000 people or more, you can see the spread there. Obviously in South Africa, there's quite a few. If you look at the Greater Gaborone region in Botswana, it's probably around 400 to 450,000. Namibia, Botswana don't have large cities. But then once you get further up into Mozambique, Zambia, parts of Malawi, Angola, and the DRC and Tanzania, you do have these big populations. To take it into a slightly broader African context, by the end of this decade, Nigeria alone will have more cities with 1 million people in them than the European Union. So think of that in terms of what Jacques was talking about, in terms of non-revenue water, in terms of the need for water management and a proper utility management all the way through, not just from pumping water, but in terms of customer CRM systems, demand management, supply management, all of those sort of things. Urbanization is a key feature of Southern Africa, in fact, the whole of Africa, rapid urbanization. And obviously with that comes the need for the supply of potable water to consumers, but also to the industries that will feed, clothe, house, and all the rest of it, people in those areas. So it is something that I think is of a fair amount of urgency. In terms of water projects, there's about 70 billion, but as I've said, not all of them are realistic. Some of them are long-term sort of government plans that you would not necessarily see coming to fruition in the next 5 to 10 years. Some of them are simply not achievable because the countries themselves don't have the finance that they need. So you're probably looking at closer to 45 to 50 billion dollars worth. Also, a growing focus not just on dams and pipelines, but that urban water supply. So you can see there, water storage, pipelines, distribution accounts for about 70% by value, and then water and sanitation infrastructure about 21%. Hydropower and storage dams, which do have implications for the sector, another 8%, and then desalination, particularly on the western side of Southern Africa. So the Western Cape and the Northern Cape in South Africa, up into Namibia, where you have very little rainfall and not much in terms of rivers or dams. So there is a need for desalination. just in terms of some of the key issues, climate change obviously is the most important issue. And what we're seeing in Southern Africa is increasing frequency of both floods and droughts. I'm currently sitting in Malawi, working on an agricultural program. And in Malawi, there are droughts in the south and floods in the north at the moment. So even within countries, you have a difference. You have, in terms of regional droughts, Namibia currently has the worst drought it's experienced in 100 years, and that drought cuts across a swathe of southern Africa from Namibia through Botswana, parts of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, and into Mozambique. So you've got that. But then you also have floods on the Indian Ocean seaboard, particularly Mozambique, which is most of Mozambique is just a large floodplain. So whether the rainfall comes in from cyclones off the Indian Ocean or from very heavy rainfalls in the hinterland, the rivers burst, rivers like the Zambezi, the Crocodile rivers and others, and then flood a lot of Mozambique, as well as parts of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi. And that also speaks to the need for things like hurricane-resistant infrastructure, managing floodplains, and how to do that. Every time Mozambique has catastrophic floods, it literally sets the country back a decade in terms of infrastructure development, and also in terms of not just lives lost, but livelihoods lost. You can see anything up to sort of 500,000 people at any one time will lose their livelihoods because of flooded small-scale agriculture. Droughts obviously have the same impact on agriculture, bearing in mind that probably 70% of people in Southern Africa still rely on agriculture as their primary source of income or a source of income. In addition to that, the bulk of agriculture in Southern Africa is rain-fed. Small-scale farmers are dominating. You do have the introduction in South Africa. There is quite a lot of irrigated infrastructure of agriculture, and you're starting to see governments and commercial farms in the rest of the region implementing irrigation, and in some instances quite high-tech irrigation in terms of managing exact water needs for crops. But with this, you also see that there is a growth in both food crops and export crops, which is putting more pressure on water supply and water availability in the region. Urban migration obviously creates more demand for food, and that creates pressure on water and sanitation in cities and towns. So there is a need for dams and irrigation for sustainable agriculture and incomes, and obviously for water supply to towns and cities, and that is a large part of what's happening in the region. Although it must be said, if you look at Lake Kariba, which is the largest man-made dam, I think on Earth, certainly in Africa, and it currently sits at around 10% capacity, which means that Zambia has grid power for 3 hours a day because Kariba is the largest source of power. So the knock-on effects are quite catastrophic from that perspective. Competing demand for scarce resources, agriculture, whether it's for subsistence or commercial, feeding the region and for exports. It's actually something that a lot of people don't realize is that 95% of food produced in Africa is actually consumed in Africa, and Africa is a net exporter of food, despite the catastrophic droughts and so on that result in the need for humanitarian assistance. Mining, I've talked about that surge in energy mineral projects. It's not just energy minerals, it's across the scope. Industrial development, Africa is starting to develop an industrial base. A lot of it demands from downstream basic products, so agri-industrial manufacturing, downstream mining, and industrial development, urbanization, tourism, including wildlife, and that also brings in a conflict with human needs. So as human needs expand, human footprint is coming more and more into conflict with wildlife, and obviously wildlife, apart from just wanting to exist is a great source of tourism revenue. So managing water resources, Jacques has talked extensively about infrastructure deficits, the lack of proper maintenance, non-revenue water, impacts on sustainability of water utilities, and then in terms of being able to replenish infrastructure and extract payments out of consumers. In South Africa, it's not just home consumers. We have a problem with industrial consumers not paying the proper tariffs, as well as local authorities that are guilty of that as well. So in terms of opportunities, what does that mean? It means water management technology, technology for reduced water use, especially household and industrial consumption. So recycling, reduction in demand, better management, desalination, although obviously there are concerns over the impact of desalination plants and the waste that's produced from them. Better management of water supply, irrigation dams and systems, drought-resistant crops. There's opportunities for that. Better technology in irrigation, water supply dams to ensure adequate supply and mitigate against flooding and droughts in the region, so you have a more constant supply. But when you have a 1 in 100-year drought, obviously that then becomes very difficult to manage as well. And then investment in that end user infrastructure, pipelines, water treatment plants, recycling technology, and demand side and supply side management and monitoring technology. So those are some of, at a very top level, the opportunities, and I'm sure you'll hear more about it in the panel discussion. But there's also, in terms of constraints and opportunities, legislation and regulations. Water is a very political issue. Access to potable water, water is life. So it is political, and governments are loath to either privatize water utilities, some are starting to concession them as opposed to privatizing, or to charge commercial recovery rates for supply, particularly into poorer consumers. And how do you then cross-subsidize those when most countries in the region have very small middle and upper income or industrial consumers that could do that? So it requires a fair amount of donor support and cost-effective solutions. Most countries simply don't have adequate finance. They have old infrastructure. The ability of clients to pay is a problem. Technical expertise differs by country, but generally there's a need for an improvement in domestic technical expertise. And I think this is something that African governments are quite rightly starting to insist on, is that companies from outside of the region don't simply parachute in, do a project and parachute out again with all the loot in tow, but that there is a transfer of technology, a transfer of skills and skills development. So it enables countries to do it for themselves. One of the things we notice in Africa is that we're moving quite quickly and leapfrogging traditional development paths. So if you look at mobile phones, we've, for the most part, leapfrogged landlines. Most African consumers that have a phone have never owned a landline, but we're now sitting at 70% plus access to mobile phones, which also has impacts in terms of ICT, finance. You're no longer having brick and mortar banks. It's through mobile money transfers, and that can be applied to water and sanitation, particularly in terms of how you interact with consumers to pay for that. Decentralized supply in rural areas, in other words, not building massive pipelines and large infrastructure, but things like solar boreholes and that kind of management system. And then industry as a threat and opportunity, the increase in consumption by mines and manufacturers. But we've seen this in some areas in South Africa where water treatment plants on mines, which are run particularly effectively, can also supply surrounding communities. And that really is an opportunity to say, with all of this development, how can we utilize that infrastructure at not just a mine level, but a broader community level? So in conclusion, you've got a region that will be $1 trillion economy, well over 400 million consumers by the end of this decade. You've got these key sectors that are growing quickly in much of the region, including urbanization of the population. Climate change is a massive threat to stability and growth, whether it's food supply, livestock, wildlife, rural and urban water supply, or industrial supply. And then an excellent opportunity to introduce technologies, systems, and solutions that reduce water consumption and ensure stability of supply. And I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for this very nice overview on the situation in the region. You can stop sharing your screen, and we will now go on to the panel. And we will not be using presentations for the panel, so I'll try to pin the 4 of the panelists to the screen so that we can see who is speaking. Let me see how to do this. That's okay. Oh, Munya is doing it, I think. Okay, and I would just to ask the panelists to be careful for time, because we still want everyone to have time to speak without going too much over time. So we'll try to keep it to 5 minutes each. And we'll start with Dr. Greenwell Machaya from the International Water Management Institute. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And I would like to ask you to maybe say a word about what the Institute is doing, and then we'd like to hear your view on what are the most critical innovations and technologies needed to effectively address the challenges in Southern Africa and the needs of local communities. Can you turn on your camera? Okay. Yes, we see you.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much, Catherine. Indeed, I'm Greenwell Machaya here at the International Water Management Institute. The International Water Management Institute is kind of one of the 15 centers which constitute the consultative group on international agricultural research. And we are headquartered in Colombo, but we are also spread across the continent. In Africa, we are in Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Egypt, and then South Africa. So in South Africa, we are like a hub for the Southern Africa region. And we, in terms of what we do really, I mean, we do research for development, focusing on issues of, okay, water, but as it is useful for agriculture, as well as for energy and for general, also food production. We do have a new strategy right now, and that strategy tries to look at the mitigation of water risks and then overcoming global inequalities, as well as managing water sustainability as some of the key focus areas for that strategy. And in order to do that, we also try to, we utilize levers. So some of the levers are utilizing water and data science. So I was happy to hear colleagues who were talking about, touching or highlighting some of the importance of these issues, as well as also leveraging on water governance, focusing on gender, youth, as well as scaling finance and investments, because all these are extremely important. Now, when it comes to the question that you're talking about, we do conduct studies periodically, and I think between 2022 and 2023, we also did engage in some studies with the assistance of African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation to try and understand what sort of technologies were in demand by countries in the Southern Africa region, especially targeting the Zambezi riparian countries. So these include the Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, as well as Tanzania. And indeed, what we discovered there is that, if you look at, you can try to look at the technology demands, because we also focus much on agriculture. You take it from the perspective of a value chain, or for most of the things that the stuff that is produced there. But if you summarize, you find that, okay, in the first place in the region, there is kind of an acute need for technology that is technology that can help improve efficiency of water use, etc. So, but there are differences when you move from one country to another, because not all the countries are at the same level. I can just summarize maybe as a start that to say that we did discover that or find out that there was much demand for, say, or smartphones. Smartphones as a delivery mechanism for various things, for example, information. Because I think most of this technology seems to be demanded because they want, I mean, farmers would like to have access to information. Now, in order to have that information, they need to have smartphones. And smartphones are expensive, so there's need for some kind of business models that can deliver those smartphones at a cheaper price. And then also moisture detectors. So we did discover that for some of the farmers and stakeholders who are doing irrigation, it was important for them to optimize the use of water resources. Now, in order to do that, they would want something that would tell them that, okay, now it's time to start irrigating, and now it's time to stop to avoid waterlogging. So chameleon sensors and other waterfront detectors, wetting front detectors would be very useful. But they also did mention in most of these countries that they would have advisory from the weather services. However, in some cases, weather station would tell them, weather services would tell them that there will be rain, and then they mobilize resources, start planting, only to see that the rains are not coming. We discovered through research that part of that is that the information is not localized enough. So there is need for automatic weather stations across across countries, so that at least when information is channeled to households, it has to be almost closer to that household rather than something that almost summarizes a district level information. And there was also need for drones. So these drones are needed for estimating, or I mean, monitoring the health of crops as they grow. So at the production level, we discovered that these are on demand. And again, mobile applications now tagged to related to those mobile phones. Mobile applications, mobile money applications are extremely important. And it turned out that for those farmers that seem to have those mobile applications, they face lower costs compared to those who do not have it, because the cost of going to the bank or withdrawing money is just so high. It's better to have some of those. And you would be surprised that there's still a sizable amount of people in the region that do not have access to that. And again, those early warning systems, some of them have to be kind of strengthened. There are some cases where the predictions are just wrong. In some cases, they're okay, but some cases they're just wrong. And this is speaking to the need to build capacity from the perspective of hardware, software, as well as human capital in the area of early warning systems. Agricultural market information, intelligent monitoring systems, which I think is Duncan also alluded to, are all also very, extremely important. But there's also another kind of technology they're talking about much, and this is to do with weather-based, crop-based insurance, or weather-based, weather index-based insurance, whereby you can pay out to people, to farmers, depending on the weather. But in order to do that, you need to have them subscribe to that. Now, they don't just subscribe to that if that is not available. So there's need to have that scaled up in the region. In Malawi, I know that they're having that, but I don't think it's everybody else is subscribing to that. In Mozambique, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, all those countries, they have expressed need for that. But behind all those parametric insurance systems is an assumption that there's good data. But in most cases, there is also a need to have very good technologies for predicting floods in specific locations, as well as predicting drought, as well as predicting vulnerability of households. Without that, you might find that that weather-based insurance might not necessarily be as effective, although it's on high demand. But they also said within the livestock sector, for example, you find that because of poverty and other things, animals are usually stolen from farmers. And without tagging them, you can't trace where they are. So tagging animal sensors would also be extremely useful. These were kind of echoed in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Tanzania, Mozambique, etc. So these are important. But they also said it's always useful for farmers to know what kind of crops they need to grow and where. So having digital soil maps would be extremely useful. But if you look at Zambia is trying, but if you go to Malawi, maybe they haven't updated those maps. You go to Zimbabwe, there's need for a lot of support there. And these are kind of intensive in terms of financing. So maybe that's also another thing that one can generally also consider. Now, over and above all these, it's the irrigation technologies. They have to be efficient. So efficient ones, solar ones, would all be very useful. I know that maybe I've spoken so long. I can stop there for now.
Thank you, Dr. Machaya. But maybe you have a report that we can share with all these insights also, and we'll be happy to share with the participants, because I know you have a lot to say, but unfortunately we have time constraints.
And, I can share that. I can share that. We have reports for the Zambezi region and for individual countries.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will switch the order now, because Lawrence Devers has to leave us at 10, so we'll hear what he has to say. Lawrence is a fellow Belgian and also General Manager for Sub-Saharan Africa at Waterloo. And Lawrence, Waterloo has been a key player in the water sector in Southern Africa. And we'd like you to share with our participants today your experience in operating in the region, the challenges and opportunities that you've encountered, and how your company has adapted to the unique needs of the local market. And also if you have advice to share with other companies looking to contribute to water solutions in Southern Africa.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for the introduction, and apologies to jump the queue, but I have another meeting at 10 o'clock that I cannot miss. Good morning, all. My name is Lawrence, based in South Africa and responsible for Waterloo in Sub-Saharan Africa. So from South Africa, we service all our clients in Africa. As mentioned in the first presentation, EPC, we are the EPC contractor, so we do EPC work. We design, engineer, build, construct water treatment and effluent treatment plants, as well as water reclamation plants, which is becoming more and more municipal, more focused on Northern Africa. In South Africa, we are now bidding on some interesting projects in the Western Cape in South Africa. But our main clients in South Africa remain the food and beverage companies. So we work a lot for Heineken, Diageo, Coca-Cola, AB InBev, where we sorry, can everybody still hear me? Hello?
Yes, we hear you. It's sometimes a bit, we have some cuts, but we can still hear you.
Okay, sorry for that. So we work a lot for the food and beverage clients, getting their water security, because that's what they're looking at for them when they don't receive stable supply, also mentioned in previous presentations, due to leakages, due to shortages in water. The industries, they look at us to provide them stable water supply to continue production. A little bit the same what nowadays private clients are doing in the energy sector, looking at generators, PV, solar panels to foresee in their own needs. In the water side, so make sure that they can run as long as possible if there is no stable supply from governments. So that's what we as Waterloo are doing. Nowadays, a lot of the focus shifted to water reuse projects, both for industries and municipalities. So where we are cleaning up effluent back to potable water standards. The technologies are there.
I think we are losing Lawrence. Lawrence, do you still hear us? Connection has been quite unstable. Am I the only one to have issues or?
Apologies.
No, I also can't hear him.
Yeah, he froze
Lawrence
on
is
my
frozen.
screen.
Short. I'll drop my email address in the chat if there's any further questions or follow-up. Thank you for the opportunity, and any questions I can answer by email or at a later stage.
Okay, thank you so much, Lawrence. Thank you. Apologies for this technical issue. We'll now move on with Diego Juan Rodriguez. You are lead water economist at the World Bank, and we're very interested to know what are the main projects that the World Bank is working on in the water sector in Southern Africa.
Yes, thanks, Catherine, and thanks, colleagues. I'm cognizant of time, so I'll fly through some things that we have. We basically provide two different types of instruments in general to the countries. One is, of course, the lending. So we invest in infrastructure and in institutional reform. And the second one is mainly through analytical work. But for the purpose of this webinar, I'll concentrate on a couple of things that I think are critical, particularly for technology companies or consulting groups that are trying to enter these markets. No? And it's basically that we are now working on we're preparing a large lending operation in South Africa to reform what is called the trading services in the municipalities. No? So we're concentrating on the 8 largest cities, they call them here metro cities, because we found that most of these trading services, and in this case is water supply, sanitation, electricity, and solid waste, they basically are run through municipal departments, and there is a lack of sort of proper utilities. Right? Why is this important is primarily because if you want to create the enabling environment to bring in new technologies, different sources of funding, if you don't have that institutional structure, it's very difficult to attract any potential suppliers to the market. So the trading services reform program that we are starting would be basically an incentive-based reform in which we are bringing an instrument that National Treasury can use. Most of the financing comes from National Treasury to the water sector in the form of grants. And we are basically shifting the way that these grants have been transferred to municipalities. Now, there's a large tendency to only look at more infrastructure investments, whether it's capital expenditures or support to operational expenditures. But here what we're saying is that you have to provide those grants based on the reforms on the institutional governance and financial reforms that these cities undertake. And this becomes critical in certain areas in which are important as enablers to different technologies and different expertise from outside the country. It has to do with policies in which policies have to clearly provide the incentives and allow that open market to exist. It has to be critically also on regulations and procurement. A lot of the procurement processes are very based, sort of technology based. So there is a sort of a fixed type of technology that the country is supporting, and that does not allow in the procurement processes for new entries in the market and new technologies. It has to do also with how you regulate those sectors and how you allow new technologies to come into market. And finally, it has to do with the capacity of these, utilities to be, in a sense, to understand how those technologies can be adopted and implemented in their respective sectors. And very critical that is linked to that process is also the financial aspects. We have very, very, very low collection rates here. Tariffs do not properly reflect the cost of the service provision. There's very, very limited private finance in the sector. And then linked to the issue of the program that we are starting with National Treasury is how you can improve the efficiencies of the public expenditures. So linking the financing with governance changes and also how you operate the systems become critical components as a as a way to strengthen the enabling environment for some of these groups. Again, I'm cognizant of time, so I have to stop there, Catherine. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Diego. This was very, very interesting. So our last panelist is Mr. Mogan Parayashi from Rainwater. You are a manager of innovation and technologies. And Rainwater is managing the water utility in Gauteng and also developing a number of projects with private sector mines and large industries. So what do you see as the most pressing needs for these industries when it comes to water security?
Thanks, Catherine, and good morning to your delegates. I'm the head of innovation and new technologies at Rainwater in the business unit of the Rainwater Institute. A quick word about Rainwater. It's one of the largest water utilities in the world. We are a bulk water utility established in 1903, primarily responsible for the abstraction of surface water from the integrated Vaal River system, and we supply about 5 billion liters a day using conventional treatment processes to large metropolitans such as Joburg Water, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane Metro, as well as to local municipalities, industries and mines. We've been in existence for the last 121 years, and we've seen this the water sector change in South Africa due to many topics covered by the previous speakers in terms of urbanization trends, etc., but lots of challenges as well. Just in terms of Rainwater, we have about 3,500 kilometers of large diameter steel pipelines, about 200 kilometers of precessed concrete pipelines, and we abstract and treat water and pump it over very long distances. And hence, basically, energy is one of the key cost drivers in Rainwater, as well as, of course, we're restricted by the Department of Water and Sanitation in terms of our abstraction licenses. We've seen that we supply to the municipalities, as I've indicated, and we see that water losses in the municipal network are out of control, ranging from 45 to about 70% in some of the areas that we service. So these are unique challenges that we are facing. Well, not unique, because as we know, it's a global challenge, and we've seen success stories from some of the industries or some of the other companies globally. Now, in terms of some of our major goals going forward, in terms of ensuring water security and resilience for Gauteng and surrounding areas, we've got many programs in place. Besides our core business, which is in terms of water distribution and abstraction, treatment, purification, and distribution of water, we have a huge asset management program. I'm sure those of you that live in the Gauteng and surrounding areas would have seen our communications in terms of the maintenance that we've undergone over the last couple of months, and this is routine maintenance. We have a huge focus on asset management using and leveraging exponential technologies and solutions, and we also very focused on water quality, in fact exceeding World Health standards, World Health Organization standards, and complying to ISO 17025 accreditation services. Now, in terms of energy security, I mentioned that's one of our key challenges. We have many programs from short-term, medium-term, and long-term initiatives. Some of them focus on the short term, which is on creating efficiencies towards optimizing pumping and distribution, making sure that we are working with companies and suppliers that have a same focus in terms of designing and creating energy efficient instrumentation and pumps and valves. In terms of our medium-term initiatives, we are implementing solar and hydro in Rainwater, and this is about to commence in terms of having inline turbines to produce energy, and of course solar, as we know. And our long-term projects, and I said long-term, within the next 5 years, we would basically be working with IPPs in terms of ensuring energy security up to about 400 megawatts created. And here we're looking at alternative technologies, not just solar and hydro, but perhaps nuclear fission, perhaps gasification technologies, or any other technologies. We saw our president meeting with Elon Musk yesterday or the day before. So hopefully there's some good news to come from that and some new technologies as well. So that's on the energy side of things. In terms of alternative water sources, I mean, we've leveraged exponential technologies such as satellite images and satellite image analysis. We work with a whole range of satellite providers globally, not just in terms of detection of groundwater, but also also leaks and cyanobacteria in our catchment area, as well as sinkholes. Yesterday, I was in a conversation with a senior project engineer from Swanee Metro who was talking about the risk associated with sinkhole development. As you know, Gauteng is on a dolomitic area. So we have a huge focus on risk mitigation using exponential technologies and innovation. But, we have a huge program now in terms of tapping into groundwater. We're looking at about 200 megaliters per day being leveraged from groundwater sources, which we've identified in our area of supply. And then we'll either blend that or we'll have decentralized systems. We have a huge focus on water reuse, working closely with Mfuleni local municipality, where through our Rand Water Services PTY, which is a special purpose PTY vehicle of Rand Water, we now have leveraged the assets of Mfuleni local municipality, and we are looking at reuse of water at that particular municipality, as well as working in collaboration with the City of Joburg and Northern Works, and also with IRWAT in terms of reuse. So certainly, you know that when it comes to climate resilient strategies, water reuse is probably the most low-hanging fruit, together with non-revenue water reduction. Speaking of non-revenue water reduction, the first presentation was quite interesting, and we are basically emulating a certain that particular type of methodology, leveraging on digital technology, smart sensors, acoustics, and of course AI. So we're working now closely with the leading SMMEs locally, continentally, and internationally to use data that we produce to be able to predict failure, to be able to predict leaks. And also, how do you fix these leaks? We have a network that we cannot shut down very often. So how do we find solutions to be able to, one, determine the condition of our assets without actually interfering with the pipe? And we're using technologies that comes from Europe, Russia in particular. We also have technologies that are able to fix pipes under pressure. So this is where we're going in terms of Rand Water. We also have a circular approach in terms of working with our municipalities to beneficiate the biosolids that come through from the wastewater plants. And finally, just to give you an indication of the current news in terms of the water situation in Gauteng and surrounding areas, through our chief executive and our board, we have very, very close relationship with national government, Department of Water and Sanitation, together with COCTA and local government. There is now regular meetings with the Premier of Gauteng to ensure water loss reduction, focus on water security. I must say, in Rand Water, as a bulk water utility, the latest figures indicate that our water loss is about 4.86%, which is quite low when you compare to municipal networks of about 50 to 60%. And yeah, so I'll leave it as that for now. I'm looking at the time as well.
Yeah, thank you
There's a
so
lot
much,
more that we
Ruben.
can talk about.
Yes.
We'll enter into Q&A shortly. Thank you.
Yes, we've covered as much as we could, but water is a vast topic, and with 1 hour only, it's a bit short to cover everything. But thank you for your presentation, for your answer, Mr. Padayashi. We will now quickly take a few questions. Marius, have you been monitoring the chat? Do we have questions from the participants?
Thank you, Catherine. We don't have questions as yet, but please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A platform. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think we slightly over time, and we already, I see that we've started to lose participants already. But anyway, any question can also be addressed by email, and we will definitely follow up and contact any of the speakers that might have an answer to those questions. So feel free, if you're not commenting or sharing anything now, to reach out by email, and we will definitely find answers for you. I see a first question.
Yes, it's a comment from Catherine. She was just saying thank you for the interesting presentation.
Okay, so that's not a question. All right. Well, thank you to all participants for being here this morning, and to all our contributors this morning. Very intensive session, I believe, with a lot of information shared. We will have in this series of webinar, we have one more edition that will be on October 17, and we will focus on the market of the Indian Ocean. So we will share, of course, information soon about this next edition. And if there is no question, I will wish you all a very good day. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.